Now, of course, one of the population that has the highest IQ and the best grades at school are Asians. And of course, if you are an Asian, you're more likely to be discriminated by these discretionary method for interviews at Harvard because you perform better than the average Jew on a test, but you cannot get those points for courage, personality, and network of accomplishment. See this described here on Fox News.
Listen to this story. Asian Americans who apply to Harvard University had some of the highest academic grades on their resumes. But admissions officers were not impressed with their personalities. That's according to a study of admissions records filed Friday by a group that's suing the school over alleged discrimination. Quote, Students for Fair Admissions says this is putting the students at a disadvantage and giving them some of the lowest admission rates. But wouldn't this all be solved if we just went by merit? Jason Riley is a Fox News contributor, Manhattan Institute.
The undertones of this interview, because they're gonna pass this entire interview without saying Jewish. So it's the problem of Asians. Why are Asians so intelligent, but they don't get in Harvard? Wouldn't it be better to just go by merit? You have no idea of what you're fighting against.
Senior fellow and the author of the book, False Black Power, ? Jason, thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Good morning.
So Harvard is looking at the admission of Asian Americans, and they're saying, well, your test scores are great, but some of the other attributes we don't like so much, and that's what they're taking into account.
Right, and Harvard has been denying that they've done this for decades, even though it's pretty clear that they do. As the Asian population of America has grown in recent decades, at schools that use race-blind admissions.
By the way, those are all talking points from Kevin McDonald and Ron Unz that date back to 2012, even before. I've seen articles on David Duke's website by Kevin McDonald quoting Ron Unz in 2013, saying exactly what this black guy is saying, but then pointing out to the fact, so there's a Jewish problem of admission at Harvard. There is an overrepresentation of Jewish admission. But this guy will master how to talk of all of this from the perspective of the Asian American. We know there's something wrong. We know there's something wrong about the Asians. They don't get into Harvard. What's happening?
We've seen Asian enrollment go up, but at Harvard it somehow stayed pretty much the same as a percentage of the overall student body for decades. And Harvard says that's just a coincidence. We're not.
Did he just say coincidence on Fox News? Oh my God, I love this guy.
Using quotas, which of course are banned by the Supreme Court. But here we see that they clearly are. They've been caught here, and they're nervous about what might happen in this lawsuit.
So they give Asian Americans lower ratings on things like positive personality, likability, courage, kindness, and being widely respected.
Can you imagine? These guys have looked at the statistics and they're like, the likability of Asians is rated so low. What the heck is happening? Oh, we can tell you a little bit about what's happening. Your Asian, your interviewer population is not very sympathetic to Asians. They don't find them likable enough.
So they're looking at the whole world through the lens of race, and
Yes.
as a result, one race gets discriminated against.
Yes, exactly. Asians are essentially.
Now that is a misleading statement. It's not as a result, one race gets discriminated against. What's happening here is you have a bunch of interviewers at Harvard, and there's no way they can do that other than by being coordinated. They're essentially told, look, we're going to have to rate the Asians lower, or else this entire university will be Chinatown. And so what do? They diminish the scores on all of these things where it's all subjective. So they diminish the score on network of prestige. They diminish the score on likability, on personality, because they know very well that if it's the matter of grades, it's gonna be Chinatown in Harvard. But the false, the misleading statement here, this is not disadvantaging one race, the Asians. What's happening here is that the Asian case of discrimination allows you to pull the veil on a much larger case of discrimination, which is pro-Jewish discrimination against non-Jewish whites.
Competing only with one another to get into these elite schools, and of course it's not fair. And that's what happens when you try to advantage one group, you necessarily disadvantage other groups. This is a zero-sum game at these elite schools. There are only so many slots to go around, and Harvard is trying to racially balance its student population. And to be fair to the school, the Supreme Court has given them a lot of wiggle room to do this, because the Supreme Court keeps punting on this issue. Can you use race in admissions or not? Or how much can you use it? And the Supreme Court has basically been saying, oh, it can be a factor as long as it's not the decisive factor.
Yeah, that's a ridiculous case again, and we've seen that in other cases of the Supreme Court not serving its role at all. Same thing in the bake the cake. The Supreme Court is supposed to be there to finally give a final answer about something. So when they say, well, it can be a factor, but it can't be the determining factor, well, to what extent? What do you call a determining factor? What if your secondary factors take so much importance in your admission process that it essentially determines about 90% of your admission, which from the own admission of Harvard professors is pretty much what it is. So merit-based admission at Harvard, and by merit I mean grades, represents 10% of admissions. So in a system where you allow discretion for 90%, have you violated the Supreme Court rulings yet? How much do you need for it to be a violation? 99? 99.9? It seems that the major criteria here is a criteria of discretion by the interviewer, and it determines 90% of the admissions.
And so schools don't really have some hard barriers as to where to go here, and it leads to situations like this. So we really need the Supreme Court to issue a definitive ruling about whether race can be used in this process or not.
Harvard says this in response. They say the analysis of the data and evidence makes clear that Harvard does not discriminate against applicants from any group, including Asian Americans, whose rate of admission has grown 29% over the last decade. But as you said, schools can interpret the amount of race they want to factor in.
Yes, but we have to, originally, affirmative action was supposed to redress what whites had historically done to blacks. Why Asians should be disadvantaged in order to address that is just a mystery to me. This is not the way the system should work. These policies are not only discriminatory, they're harmful.
Now this guy, there's some stuff I love about him, but what he just said there, it reveals the hidden agenda of affirmative action. He literally just told us affirmative action was good when it was to repair for black people against white people. But why would we use it now against Asians? And so these people are for justice in a unilateral fashion. It's like, to them it makes sense as long as it's the oppressed minority that gets helped by it. So you won't hear this guy defend affirmative action for whites.
And we know that from the evidence. So I think that a race-blind admissions process is the way to go. And I think that would be the fairest course for everyone, particularly Asians. They should not be punished for excelling academically, which essentially is what Harvard is doing to them.
Absolutely. Well, Jason, it's Father's Day. Yeah. You've got a bit of a message.
All right. So I think it's an interesting case of a an important discussion that's been going on for more than 5 years. All of these points, by the way, are not new. We knew that there were Jewish overrepresentation. Even Steven Pinker tried to argue against this. He made a very poor case against the articles of Ron Unz, Kevin McDonald, articles which were published on the David Duke website. It's clear that there is a problem of Jewish overrepresentation at Harvard, and and we have something that no one wants to say, even on Fox News today. Whites are the target of this discrimination. And the black guy on Fox News doesn't want to say it. The host doesn't want to say it. Even Ron Unz, who wrote one of the papers at the source of this controversy, doesn't say it anymore. He kind of moved on to mainstream conservatism. So let's hope that this lawsuit, I don't mind that the lawsuit is Asian-centric, because the more this lawsuit progresses, the more the data will be available to answer the final question, which is the intra-white discrimination that's happening at Harvard. And maybe at some point, the Asians who are complaining against these facts, they will need to start dividing the whites to really see the amount of oppression, the amount of discrimination that there is at Harvard. Because as was pointed out by Kevin McDonald himself, what's happening with these admission rates is that you can make any argument. You can make the argument that Jews are not overrepresented at Harvard, but you need to use the most strict definition of Jewish. It's like, oh, if you haven't gone to Jewish school, you're not Jewish. However, if you use reasonable racial identifiers that indicate that you are a descendant of the Jewish people, then it becomes clear that Jews are overrepresented. And one of the things that was